North Korea launched an intermediate-range ballistic missile on Sunday, the first test since a new president took office in South Korea this past week, and called for dialogue with the North. The missile took off from the northwestern city of Kusong and flew more than 430 miles before landing in the sea between North Korea and Japan, the South Korean military said in a statement. Data on the launch was still being analyzed by the South to determine the type of missile. Saying that North Korea had been a flagrant menace for far too long, the White House said in a statement late Saturday in Washington that the test served as a call for all nations to implement far stronger sanctions against Pyongyang. The United States maintains our ironclad commitment to stand with our allies in the face of the serious threat posed by North Korea, the statement said. Continue reading the main story. Related coverage. A new North Korean missile test ends in failure April 28, 2017. U.S. anti-missile system in South Korea is said to be nearly operational April 27, 2017. North Korean missile launch fails, and a show of strength fizzles April 15, 2017. It also noted that the missile had fallen closer to Russia than Japan, adding that the president cannot imagine that Russia is pleased. Russia, a Cold War-era ally of North Korea, is a member of the so-called Six-Nation talks aimed at persuading North Korea to give up its nuclear arsenal in return for diplomatic and economic benefits. The forum, first begun in 2003, has been stalled since 2008. The missile on Sunday reached an altitude of more than 1,245 miles during its 30-minute flight time, the Japanese government said. That data, combined with the announcement by South Korea that the projectile covered a distance of 430 miles, showed that it was an intermediate-range ballistic missile that could target key United States military bases in the Pacific, including those in Guam, missile experts said. This was the North's first missile test since a launch on April 29 that was considered a failure, with the unidentified projectile exploding a few minutes after liftoff. Under a series of United Nations Security Council resolutions, the country is banned from developing or testing ballistic missiles. In South Korea, President Moon Jae-in ordered an urgent meeting of top security officials during which he condemned the missile launch as a clear violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions and ordered his military to be prepared for provocations by the North. Mr. Moon, who won the presidential election on Tuesday, said the move was deeply regrettable only days after he took office, calling for dialogue with the North. We keep our door open for dialogue with North Korea, but we must act decisively against North Korean provocations so that it will not miscalculate, Mr. Moon was quoted as saying by his office. We must show that dialogue is possible when the North changes its attitude. Mr. Moon also urged his military to speed up its development of an indigenous land-based ballistic missile defense system known as the Korean Air and Missile Defense. After a series of North Korean missile tests, Mr. Moon's ousted predecessor, Park Geun-hye, agreed to the deployment of an American missile defense system, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, known as THAAD. Mr. Moon has questioned the technical and political usefulness of THAAD, whose deployment has angered China. Mr. Moon's victory on Tuesday brought South Korean liberals back to power. They favor dialogue with North Korea, saying that sanctions alone have not worked to stop its nuclear and missile threats. North Korea has a history of raising tensions to strengthen its leverage when its foes have proposed negotiations or to test new leaders in Seoul or Washington. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan strongly protested the North's action in comments to reporters. Speaking on Sunday morning, Mr. Abe described the repeated missile launches as a grave threat against Japan and vowed to cooperate with the United States and South Korea. The test on Sunday came one day after a senior North Korean diplomat said her government would be willing to meet with the Trump administration for negotiations if the conditions are set. The diplomat, Choi Sun-hee, did not elaborate on what the North's conditions were, but some former American officials have been considering the possibility of North Korea and the United States returning to serious negotiations for the first time since 2012. The United States and North Korea announced an agreement that year in which Washington would provide food aid in exchange for a moratorium by the North on missile tests and uranium enrichment and its return to six-nation talks. But that deal quickly collapsed after the North fired a space rocket that American officials said was a test of missile technology. President Trump has said he would be honored to meet Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, under the right circumstances. In its previous missile test from Kusong, North Korea launched what the Pentagon called a medium or intermediate-range ballistic missile from the Bangun Air Base on February 12. The missile, which was identified as a Pukguksong-2, flew 310 miles. The test was conducted as Mr. Trump was hosting Japan's Prime Minister, Mr. Abe, on an official visit. North Korea has said its intermediate-range Pukguksong-2 could carry a nuclear payload. The missile was also fired from a mobile launch vehicle and used a solid fuel technology that missile experts say will make it easier to hide it and launch on short notice. North Korea has been trying to build a reliable intermediate-range ballistic missile, which would be capable of reaching American military bases in the Pacific. In a New Year's Day speech, Mr. Kim said his country had reached a final stage in preparing to conduct its first test of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Although North Korea has vowed to develop the ability to attack the United States with nuclear warheads and has tested missiles that can reach throughout the Korean peninsula and its vicinity, it has never tested a long-range missile that could fly across the Pacific. Tensions had appeared to be easing on the Korean peninsula since joint South Korean-United States military exercises ended last month without North Korea conducting a nuclear test or launching one of its intercontinental ballistic missiles. North Korea launched a ballistic missile from the northwestern part of the country early Sunday, the South Korean Joint Chief of Staff said. This is the first provocative move from North Korea since South Korean President Moon Jae-in took office last week. Moon has advocated dialogue with North Korea to denuclearize. The U.S. calculated that the missile landed in water 60 miles south of Russia's Vladivostok region, a U.S. official told. Vladivostok is home to the Russian Pacific Fleet. Moon said the missile test violates UN Security Council resolutions and called it a severe challenge to the peace and security of the Korean Peninsula and the world, presidential spokesman Yoon Young-chan said. South Korea needs to show the North that even though talks are possible, it will only be possible if North Korea changes its attitude, the president told staff at the meeting. He said South Korea will respond to provocations. The direction of the missile, so close to Russia, was likely an attempt by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to send a message to both Moscow and Beijing, said Carl Schuster, a Hawaii Pacific University professor and former director of operations at the U.S. Pacific Command's Joint Intelligence Center. It tells Russia, I can touch you too, Schuster said. It tells China, I don't care what you think, I'm independent, he said. China remains one of North Korea's only allies and is responsible for much of the heavily sanctioned nation's economy. On Sunday, Chinese leader Xi Jinping launched a major trade and infrastructure summit with multiple world leaders in Beijing. Russian President Vladimir Putin as well as a North Korean delegation attended the conference. The timing is not coincidental, Schuster said, adding that Kim may be trying to get Putin more involved on the situation on the Korean peninsula. It's his way of telling the Russians, you need to speak up, and stop US-supported international sanctions on North Korea, Schuster said. The United States called for repercussions from the international community. With the missile impacting so close to Russian soil, in fact, closer to Russia than to Japan, the president cannot imagine that Russia is pleased, the statement said. Let this latest provocation serve as a call for all nations to implement far stronger sanctions against North Korea, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said in a statement. China after the test called for restraint by all parties. The current situation on the Korean peninsula is complex and sensitive. All sides should exercise restraint and refrain from taking actions that would further escalate tensions in the region. A statement from China's foreign ministry. Putin and Xi discussed the situation at the summit in Beijing, according to Russia's state news agency, TASS. Concern was expressed about the escalation of tension, including in connection with the launch of the missile of the DPRK. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov is quoted as saying, "The missile, launched near the city of Kusong, flew 700 kilometers, 435 miles, the South Korean military said. A U.S. defense official confirmed that it flew that far, but said the U.S. was still investigating to determine the type of missile. At this point, we see nothing consistent with an intercontinental ballistic missile launch," a second defense official told CNN. David Wright, co-director of the Union of Concerned Scientists, said North Korea may have shown off a missile with a considerably longer range than its current missiles with Sunday's test. Writing on his organization's blog, Wright pointed out that Japan's Ministry of Defense had the latest launch reaching an altitude of 2,000 kilometers, 1,242 miles, considerably higher than would be needed for the distance the missile traveled during what was reported as a 30-minute flight time. If the missile did reach that height and fly that long, it could reach the U.S. territory of Guam in the Pacific, Wright wrote. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe condemned the launch in a quick doorstep interview with reporters. Despite strong warning from the international community, North Korea launched a ballistic missile again, Abe said. This is totally unacceptable and we strongly protest it. North Korea's missile launch is a serious threat to Japan and clearly violate against the UN resolution. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yasuhide Suga said the government didn't initiate a J Alert, a nationwide alert system for missile launches. He added that the missile didn't come down in Japan's exclusive economic zone, waters within 322 kilometers, 200 miles, of the coast for which it has jurisdiction over resources. The projectile launch comes 2 weeks after a ballistic missile test that South Korean and U.S. officials said failed. That missile, launched April 29, blew up over land in North Korean territory, according to a spokesman for the U.S. Pacific Command. North Korea has previously attempted at least 9 missile launches on 6 occasions since U.S. President Donald Trump was inaugurated in January. Though tensions between the United States and North Korea have been higher than usual over the past few months, a senior North Korean diplomat told South Korea's Yonhap news agency on Saturday that Pyongyang is open to talks with Washington under the right conditions. Earlier this month Trump said he would be willing to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un under the right circumstances. No sitting U.S. president has ever met with the leader of North Korea while in power, and the idea is extremely controversial. North Korea has been a flagrant menace for far too long. South Korea and Japan have been watching this situation closely with us, Spicer's statement said. Kim's regime has sought to advance its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. The Trump administration has made a show of force in the region to deter those programs' development. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster briefed the president by phone about the latest missile launch, a senior White House official said.